I'm here today to talk to you about one of my favorite subjects, which is flower essences and flower essence therapy. I've been practicing herbal medicine for over 15 years now and fell in love pretty quickly with flower essences. I'm trained as an herbalist and love every aspect of herbalism. And after a few of my trainings, I decided to do a clinical training where we sat for a year. We spent time with a really wonderful woman, and she supervised us in a clinical setting, and we started to really work one-on-one with people. And when I first started working one-on-one with an individual, I realized I had all of these emotions, and I know we all do, this empathy that would just like arise in me when somebody was telling me their story. And sometimes it was almost hard for me not to cry. And I recognized really quickly that that was not my role. My role as an herbalist and as a practitioner was to hold space and really hear their story and not to be crying with them. So I said, well, that's kind of tough, being an empathetic person, and I turned to flower essences. And one of the first flower essences that I worked with and I fell in love with is yarrow flower essence, and it's in the garden, and we'll talk about that later today. Really to help with that like protective layer, to help protect the individual from feeling so overwhelmed by environmental or emotional issues happening around them. And so that was the beginning of my path to flower essences, just really recognizing how much it can help an individual. And as I went on in my clinical practice, I started sitting down one-on-one with individuals, and as herbalists, we'll spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with someone, start talking, we get to know their story. Maybe they come in because they have a female issue going on, or maybe they come in because they have rheumatoid arthritis, or they're coming in for, some other type of illness or ailment. And almost always there's this emotional component to their story. There's a part of the story that starts coming up. That's what is like the source of maybe where this pain or this disease set in. And right away I recognized, this is where flower essences can be helpful. And if we can treat and help to begin to heal the emotional issue, it's so much easier to dissolve the physical one. I'm sure most of you have seen this and agree with this. So I started using it with all of my clients and my family and my friends, and I just started having amazing results along with herbal medicine. And I'm so grateful to be talking about it still many, many, many years later. So I guess I should start at the beginning, how flower essences came into existence and how we started using them, especially in the more modern times. So there's really no way to say when anything got created ever. It's really hard for anyone to take claim to ever really even saying anything, assuming it's never been said before, or doing anything, assuming it's never been done before. I think Rosemary said the other day, you've got to be pretty creative to come up with something that hasn't been done in all of the time that we've been here on the planet. So it's hard to say when exactly flower essences first started being used as medicine. There's a lot of written record in India and China and Australia of using essences. There's a lot of ancient writings about using the dew, the morning dew, as medicine, which is so tempting, right? We walk out there and we see Lady's Mantle holding all that dew, and we're like, it has to be good for us. And so it's really hard to say when exactly flower essences first came into existence in humankind. And I also will say that if we had a little one with us right now, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and we gave them a bowl of water or a bucket of water to go play with, they would instinctually just start picking flowers and putting it in it. It's just sort of human nature to want to put flowers into water. But it was Dr. Bach, who was born in the late 1800s, who really systemized flower essences into what we know of today. And if I could be put in a time capsule and go back in history, he is certainly one of the people that I would like to go back and talk to. I think he was a very fascinating individual, and he had this beautiful, close relationship with the plants where I feel like he really was that hollow reed, and he just allowed this divinity to flow through him. I highly encourage you to read any of his writings if you want to get an idea of the type of man that he was. He was a very spiritual man, really closely connected to Source. He didn't talk about one theology, he talked about everything and everything being one, but really had some beautiful messages to share. And he started out as a physician, as a traditional allopath in London, and he was very successful. He was a hardworking man. He did really well for himself, and eventually he started working with vaccinations at the time where they were really first starting to create vaccinations. And he began to get disenchanted a little bit with the idea that using disease to cure disease, which is basically like cures like, is what vaccination principles were based upon. And he developed these no-sodes, which are still used today in the vaccine technology. So he's really definitely gave a huge amount of knowledge and his work to modern medicine, but became disenchanted, like many of us have, with the whole philosophy. And he decided, this is enough, I really don't want to do this anymore. And so he moved on to a gentler approach, and he began to study homeopathy, which I'm sure we're all a little bit familiar with, right? It's a whole other field of its own. So Dr. Bach went on to become a homeopath, and he became a very successful homeopath for about 10 years. He had a very successful practice in London, and he worked very closely with people. He really loved to observe individuals and human action and human interaction. And I would imagine him like going to parties and just sort of observing like how everybody interacted with each other and whose personality shone in which different lights. He was really a big observer of these things. And then having so many patients, he had spent a lot of time with people. And he came to a point where he felt like, there's got to be more. There's something else. I just feel like there must be something else. I don't know if he was divinely called or what, but he decided to close his practice and go off into the English countryside and start playing with flowers. This is where the time capsule would land me, by the way, if I could get there. So he went out into the countryside with nothing really other than himself, and he went by himself. And he just started studying plants and looking at plants and observing nature and seeing what was happening around him. And obviously we all know that, and we can feel it, the flower is the highest vibration of a plant. It's the most beautiful, it's the most intriguing, it's the part that calls to us, it's the part that we long for, it's the part that we draw, it's what we take photos of, it's what we hang in our house, it's the bouquets that we make. We're just inherently, as human beings, attracted to flowers because they're so beautiful. And they say that, just bringing in a bouquet into a hospital room or to somebody who's sick will immediately help speed the healing process. So just having that connection, that plant connection, especially the flower connection, is really big for us humans. We need all the help we can get. So he went out and he started observing many of the plants, and I'm actually thrilled that we have this plant with us because this is impatiens, and this is the first flower essence that Dr. Bach ever made. I'm so thrilled. I've only ever seen this growing one other time in the United States, and that was at the Flower Essence Services farm out in Nevada City, California. So when I came here, I think I took more pictures of this plant than anybody else yet. So it's pretty thrilling to have it. Does it remind you of another plant? Yeah, it's closely related to jewelweed. So it's a close relative, and they have a lot in common. The flowers are a different color, and the leaves are a little smoother, but very similar. Very similar in action, and very similar in mechanism, which is important. So when Dr. Bach went out and he started looking at the plants, he would think about people, and he would think about personalities, and he would think about how we are as individuals, and then how the plants are as individuals, and he would start applying that. And he would really look at the doctrine of signatures. I'm not sure in his writing if he ever used the term doctrine of signatures. We're all familiar with the idea that a plant can really tell us its story by us closely observing where it grows, who it grows next to, what it looks like, what color it is, what it reminds us of. And so I feel like he really applied these concepts to understanding these plants. And he would look at a plant like impatiens, and he would notice that it was tall and it stood up really straight. Impatiens likes to grow in the same area that jewelweed likes to grow. So where does jewelweed like to grow, besides next to poison ivy? What area?
Kind of near the water. I've seen it,
Yeah.
like near ponds and lakes.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, and in the shade.
yeah.
It likes to grow in cool environments. It likes to grow, it's over there along the wood line. You're never going to see it. You may see it, but it's not going to be as happy in a bright field. It likes to be in a cooler area. It likes to be along water. It has this energy where it's almost kind of always bobbing in really slow and beautiful. If you break open the stem, there's a lot of moisture to it, so it's very cooling by nature. It has this really nice cooling energy. It also has this really straight, rigid sort of stem, and then it has these leaves with these sort of jagged expressions. I'll pass one around. So all of these things he took into account. And then, of course, it has by far one of the most beautiful flowers ever, right? It's this gorgeous flower that is, to me, it's like serene and calming, and it's just barely attached to the stem, if you can see right there. So it kind of has this nature where it's just very light, very airy. The bees, they go right in there, and they disappear. Helen said on the first day, "What is that plant that the bees just keep going into?"
I was fascinated.
It's fascinating. And they disappear, because it's just a big, I like to think of it as an oasis. So it's like this, who knows what goes on in there. It's got to be fun. But so it has all of these different mechanisms. And on this one, I don't know if I'll be able to show you today, but I'll try to show you when we film this later, that the seed pods, when they're ripe, and some of them over there are, if you just barely touch them, they explode.
Right.
And they send out these spiral seeds, and it's sort of how they send their seeds out into the world, but it's this very explosive energy. It's almost surprising. If you don't expect it, you touch it, and it just explodes. And so, taking all of those things into consideration, Dr. Bach started to compare that to the human personality. Now, he started thinking about the person who may be a little tall, maybe not necessarily tall, but maybe stand a little rigid, hold themselves pretty strong. This is a strong stalk. He believed that these serrated leaves were an example of maybe like agitation, where something could be like gnawing at you or sawing at you, a little agitated. And then that seed pod, that explosive nature, he compared that to the personality, which we all have sometimes, and some of us have all the time, where, someone rubs us the wrong way, or one of our kids asks for something for the 15th time, and you just sort of explode. You answer in this like explosive way. Or it could be even more severe for the individual that really doesn't know how to communicate and always answers in this explosive way. So what's interesting is that we're not taking, the medicine is not the stem, the medicine is not the leaf, the medicine is not the seed pod. The medicine's the flower. The flower is always going to be the highest vibration of anything. It's going to be the highest expression of the plant itself. It's nothing but positivity. So this flower represents all of those positive aspects of the plant. It's cool, it's calm, it's serene. It floods the body with a feeling of patience, really, of just being able to move from that state of anxious irritability to, okay, let me try that again. And it's no coincidence that this plant is called impatience. All of these plants that have these names that correlate so beautifully, that's no coincidence. They were named that through the doctrine of signatures. So what Dr. Bach decided to do is, let me see, how can I get the essence of this flower into an individual? How can I create something where they can take this and use this as a tool? So he started experimenting. He used, I'll pass this around if you like, he used sunlight, he used moonlight, he used, all day during the day. He experimented, he did in the beginning experiment with the different parts of the plant, and he eventually came up with this equation where he would take a clean glass bowl, he would fill it with clean spring water, cover the top of the bowl with just the flowers. He used wooden chopsticks, so his energy would not go into the flower, and he would carefully fill this bowl with flowers until like the whole surface was covered. And then he let that sit in the sun for about 4 hours. And I always think about like the English countryside. It doesn't get the same sun that some of us do. So if you're in Florida or if you're in Arizona, you may not need a full 4 hours. But basically what happens is the sun penetrates through the flowers, and all of that positivity, all of the beauty, that highest expression of that plant is transmuted into the water, and then the water captures it. And so after we've allowed that to sit for some time, we get rid of the flowers, give them back to the earth, and then they start a dilution process using brandy. Dr. Bach chose brandy because he really believed it was the least adulterated of all the alcohols. He knew it would act as a preservative, but he also felt like it was a synergist, that it was really going to hold the space of that energy, because this is really energy medicine. And so through that process, he really systemized what we know of today as flower essence system. And he began to use this in his practice. He went on to make two others. Clematis, I believe, and Mimulus were the first three that he made. And he started working with them and had really incredible results. One, the first and foremost, he found that, obviously there was no interactions. There was no need to worry about how sick somebody was or how well they were or if they were taking other herbs or drugs or homeopathy. He could really use this medicine on anybody. Being trained as a homeopath, you'll see a lot of similarities with homeopathy and flower essences. The whole concept of less is more, drop dosage, and we know as herbalists and people that work with plant medicine that when you take those small amounts, it goes deep into the body. So he started working with these, and he just got really excited and went to town. And within the first year, he came up with 12, and he'd like to call those the 12 healers. And I love that they correlate with astrology, which is definitely another class. But he started with 12, and he thought to himself, okay, I have all these different personality types covered. And the reason why, if I may backtrack for a second, that he focused so heavily on personality is because he thought to himself, and he saw this through his practice, if all of us here were given the same diagnosis, if we all found out that we had a terminal illness or anything serious, because we're all different as individuals and we're all different constitutionally, we would all have a different emotional reaction to that. So some of us may get really quiet and not say much and just go inwards. Others of us may have that impatience energy and be like, forget this, that's not happening, get angry, Others may immediately start weeping and feeling sad. So he really believed that how our personality, our emotional self dealt with disease was a really good indicator of how we were going to heal. So he really wanted to create these essences that would flood the body with the highest and best. So when you take an essence, you're always taking positive. You're taking in the positive to wash out the negative. He also believed that if we stay true to ourselves, if we really listen to our intuition, if we were on the right path with source and with ourselves, that disease would stay away. It's when we started doubting ourselves, not listening to ourselves, making bad judgments, steering off of our spiritual path, that disease would set in. So he created the system that was really appropriate for everybody, that would really help wash out the one thing that was standing in our own way as humans. And I think we all can identify with that, right? If we all had to look at our more negative side, not negative, but the side of us that has the anger, the fear, the jealousy, and we could probably all come down to one thing that really is a part of us. Like for myself, I react with anger more often than I probably should. So for me, an essence like this is really wonderful. There's individuals that really operate from a place of fear, and so what they would need was Mimulus, an essence of courage. And a lot of times these beautiful flowers really correlate with the chakra system, which I love. But a lot of the yellow flowers are those healthy ego, solar plexus, like I feel great flowers. And one of the flowers I want to show you tomorrow or later on today is sunflower. It's such a perfect example of this really strong solar plexus medicine. And so these plants help us as individuals to heal, to be better people. And what a gift it is as a practitioner to have somebody come into your practice and say, my heart is breaking, and be able to give them an essence for that, to be able to give them something that's going to flood the body with love. Or I am terrified, and be able to give them an essence that's going to flood the body with courage. So it was really a fantastic thing that he had to offer. So he created the 12 healers. He worked with those. Then he decided, you know what? I think I need some help. I've got one for each personality, but there's more to people than this one thing. Just like there's more to us than just our sun sign. I'm not just a Gemini. I'm a Gemini double Pisces with all this other fantastic stuff in there. So he created the 7 helpers, 7 more essences. A few years later, he decided, you know what, let's just keep going. And he started working with a lot of the tree essences. So a lot of people, when we think about flower essences, we think about these beautiful flowers, bright, traditional flowers. So he started working with a lot of the tree essences, so pine and chestnut bud, and really beautiful tree flowers, willow. And eventually he ended up with a set of 38. And he also came up with one formula, and I'm sure you all know what it is. Rescue Remedy, yeah. And that's where he took 5 different essences, and he blended them together so that there could be one essence that everybody could take in a state of shock or trauma. And I think everyone here probably uses it. We're all very well versed with this. Our children are well versed. Megan was explaining yesterday how much she used it. I was explaining to you in my presentation how much I used it. So that was a really great contribution. And just so you know, Rescue Remedy is the #1 selling stress remedy in the world. In the world. So if anybody ever wants to tell you flower essences, how do you know that's not placebo? Well, even if it were, that's great news because it's working. But who here has given it to their animals before? Yeah, and it works, right? There's no placebo effect with animals. There's no placebo effect with children. So we know that this works. It just works on a different level than we're used to working with. So Dr. Bach, when he was done, he had his 38, he had Rescue Remedy, he put an ad out in the paper and he said, free medicine for anybody who wants it. There are flowers that heal us all. And of course, the powers that be did not like that. They came in and took his medical license, but at this point he was having such wonderful success that he didn't care. So he practiced for years with one of his assistants, working with individuals, having great results. And then at the young age of 50, he passed away. And many people believe that he passed away shortly after he had completed his work and that he was really meant to come into this world and create this work. And you'll find people that only work within the Bach essences. I feel like he came into this world to show us this mechanism, this very simple, easy mechanism to use. And he started this work, but it's up to us to continue it. So tomorrow we'll talk about some of Dr. Bach's essences. But we'll also talk about some of the North American essences that we work with. We'll talk about sunflower and black cohosh and yarrow again, and we'll talk about St. John's wort. I truly believe that Dr. Bach, a man who never charged for his work, would want all of us to bring this medicine to the people that we work with, to ourselves, to our families, and to our friends. And with that, I will close for today, and I thank you very much for joining me.